All right, so the Mac Studio is here, and it is pretty much what I was hoping for in a Mac desktop. I waited a few days to sort of collect my thoughts on it, and, well, my first thought is, holy shit. So for those of you who came to this channel because of my tech content, you've probably seen this video. This is why I bought two M1 Mac Minis. And no, despite what the comments were asking, it was not to stitch them together and make one super Mac Mini. It was because knowing that you can't upgrade the RAM on these Macs, I bought a base model 8GB Mac Mini because I literally could not deal with having my production taken down almost on a monthly basis due to the keyboard failing on my i9 MacBook Pro. So I bought the base Mac Mini and then quickly realized that 8GB of RAM wasn't enough and upgraded to the 16GB version. And since then, I have been running this entire channel for the entire year off of that mildly upgraded M1 Mac Mini. However, if you're watching this video and you read the title, yes, I am buying a base Mac Studio. Not the one with the M1 Ultra, but the one with the M1 Max. And I'm going to talk about why. Now, first and foremost, yeah, I'm not getting the M1 Ultra. I can think of several reasons why I personally do not need the M1 Ultra, and potentially why you also don't need the M1 Ultra. In fact, I have enough reasons and enough knowledge and talking points about that M1 Ultra chip that I made an entire other video that's coming out on Wednesday, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that. But the base Mac Studio really impressed me for several reasons, value being one of them, but also the design of the Mac Studio in general is just something that I've always wanted. So I've always been a big fan of the Mac Mini. I like the idea of taking a reasonably powerful machine and packing it down into a little 7x7 device. But as the years have gone on, the design has frozen. We've had the same design for a decade now, over a decade now. Like, I appreciate that it's sort of an homage back to the Power Mac G4 Cube, which is my favorite Mac of all time, but I think it's about time for a redesign. And while the Mac Studio is not a Mac Mini or a redesign of that Mac Mini, it is close enough to the look and still sits within that 7x7 footprint that it might as well be. I know it's a joke that's been made before, but it's a Mac Mini, but thick. In fact, it's got 3.7 Cs, or 3.7 inches in height to be specific. But the height is not the only thing that changed. The ports have also changed, and this is one of the first things that I noticed that made me really think that this is going to be the Mac that I buy. Port-wise, around back, we have four, count them, 4 Thunderbolt ports. That is awesome. And next to it, we have 10 gigabit Ethernet as standard. Now, I can see myself using 10 gigabit Ethernet at some point in the near future because I want to upgrade some things, but right now, not so much, but it's cool to have as standard. We also have a very robust power cord. I like that just because it sort of inspires more confidence that this is a powerful machine versus the little non-polarized cable that Apple's been using for the Mac Mini. We then have 2 USB-A ports, or whatever the hell the USB standard is calling it now. But 2 standard USB-A ports. I actually do still use standard USB for a few things. I'm trying to phase it out, but having it is still nice. We also have HDMI 2.0, but I mean, for studio work, 2.1 would be nice, but I'm all right with just having 2.0 for my use case. And then a 3.5mm jack, which, like on the phone and the iPad and the Mac Mini, I've never used since I just don't need it. Sorry. Though apparently it's the same one that they use in the MacBook Pro, which is capable of running high impedance headphones, so I guess for those kind of users, that's pretty cool. But we're not done with the ports yet, because in lieu of everything that Johnny Ive did in terms of design on the Macs for so many years, we have ports on the front. And depending on which chip you get, you have very powerful or reasonably powerful ports up front. Now, I have a little dock that I use with my Mac Mini that gives me 3 USB 3s, 2 different SD card slots, and a USB-C on the front. But built into the front of this Mac Studio, we have 2 USB-C ports that can either be Thunderbolt on the M1 Ultra or just standard USB-C on the M1 Max, and an SD card reader. Yes! Seeing that pretty much 80% sold me on this Mac Studio, just because Adding something is nice, especially considering the dock that I use is also something that holds hard drives, or in this case, solid state drives, but there are genuine ports on the front that I don't have to plug another device in to get. I shouldn't be as happy about this as I am because PCs still have it. Thank you, PC Master Race. I know, I get it. But on a Mac, we haven't seen that since the Mac Pro. Not the trash can, not the current one, the old Mac Pro, the first version. Why did it take so long? As much as I love this man's design work and what he did for Apple, he's the reason it took so long. So the design is exactly what I was hoping for. It's got just enough ports that it is perfect for a general workflow. Ports around the front, especially since it's going to be under a monitor, most of the plugs around back are just going to be plug and forget. So having ports up front is awesome. It's what I wanted out of sort of a Mac Mini Pro, at least in terms of design. Like, not massive like the Power Max or Mac Pro. Power Max, what year is it? Not the size of the Mac Pro desktop deal, but also bigger than the Mac Mini so that there could be a little more usable space on the inside and outside. But now we're going to move on to the two last things that completely sold me on buying the M1 Max base model of the Mac Studio. The first thing was the value. You really can't beat the value of this Mac Studio. We already saw from MKBHD that the M1 Max MacBook Pro, the thermally constrained one, which still isn't really thermally constrained, beat his Mac Pro desktop. The base model Mac Studio gives you the entry version of the M1 Max, which is sort of a misnomer because you still get the 10 CPU cores, you still get the incredibly awesome video encoders, but you go from 32 GPU cores to 24, which is fine for me, honestly. But you get that in a $2,000 package with 32 gigs of RAM and a 512 gigabyte SSD, which internal storage for me is nice, but I'm not going to be the person to complain about 512 because so many of my projects are saved on faster external drives for transfer and moving from device to device. All right, so let me lay this out for you. $2,000 gets you a base M1 Max chip, which really just means you're getting 24 instead of 32 GPU cores. Everything else is the same. 32 gigs of RAM, and a 512 gig SSD, which anything 512 or higher from Apple is insanely fast. Now, just for comparison's sake, I pulled up a 14-inch MacBook Pro and spec'd it to be exactly the same in terms of hardware as what we were getting in the Mac Studio. And I did this because I was actually genuinely considering buying the MacBook Pro, but I wanted to wait and see what Apple would do with the desktop setup. So I took a 14-inch MacBook Pro and I threw the M1 Max in it, the 24 GPU core version, 32 gigs of RAM, and kept it at 512 gigs of storage. And it's a $900 difference in the positive. Yeah, so yes, you have to bring your own keyboard, mouse, display, but in my case, it's just a drop-in upgrade. The MacBook Pro comes with keyboard, trackpad, and display, and that runs you an extra $900, and you still have fewer ports. How's that work? So yeah, that little comparison there pretty much put me at like 90% sure I was going to buy the Mac Studio over the MacBook Pro, but there was one more thing that completely sold me on it, that last 10% push that I got, and that was how it would actually benefit my workflow. Because at the end of the day, if I wanted to buy a really awesome computer, I could, but if it doesn't really fix or improve my workflow, it really doesn't have any value to me. Now, in terms of improvement, the things that I wanted to see improved over my Mac Mini are RAM, which we have 32 gigs of, graphics, which we have a lot more of, and port selection. See where I'm going with this? So for reference, I have been bumping up the level of production on my channel because I had the headroom. I actually bumped things up to levels I never thought I could when I was using my MacBook Pro. And this really power efficient, meant for web browsing M1 Mac Mini was handling it super well. And then I began to reach further and further and become more and more ambitious with my work. And I hit that ceiling. Fortunately, I'm not Icarus, so it didn't catch fire and I didn't fall into the ocean and drown. But I hit that wall. And you can see it in a few videos. Well, you can't see it, but when I'm editing videos, you can see here in this clip that they stutter and drop frames, even in better performance mode. Yeah, in Final Cut especially, when you put it into better performance mode and the frames are still dropping, that's how you know you've hit your limit. And this thing happily eats up 16 gigs of RAM like it's nothing. The reason why I originally moved from 8 to 16 gigs was, well, because of the RAM, and, well, we're back to square one. And then of course ports. I mentioned earlier that a company actually gave me for review a dock with storage in it. So again, storage was never an issue, and ports around the front so that I could actually plug in an SD card or some USBs. It was great. All of these things are addressed with this Mac Studio. We have way more GPU cores because in terms of the videos that I was working on, there were several videos where GPU would sit at 100% or even at like 90% most of the time without ever coming down. And with the video encoders, it's going to be even less of an issue. In terms of RAM, 32 gigs is standard. Every computer that I have worked with on a professional level has had 32 gigs of RAM until I got this Mac Mini. And 16 gigs has been impressive for what it's able to pull off, but at the end of the day, you're still moving data. You hit that limit, it's all over. 32 gigs of RAM is standard, and LPDDR5 RAM, super fast at 400 gigabytes per second of read-write. That's freaking awesome. And then ports. Ports around the back are going to be plug and forget, but there are many more of them, so that is awesome. And for the kind of connections I need up front, I can't think of anything else I would need other than 2 USB-Cs and an SD card reader. So yeah, I am buying a base model Mac Studio, and I am definitely going to be reviewing it. So make sure to get subscribed. I'm not ordering it till the end of the month just because I'm not a high-budget, rich YouTuber, so I can't really afford to just drop $2,000 at the drop of a hat. I'm buying it at the end of the month because that is when I will have the funds to do so. So keep an eye, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss it when I get it. I'm probably going to miss the review cycle, but who cares? Either way, hope you guys like this. Make sure to leave a comment on what you guys think about this new product. If you have any other questions, anything you want to know, and of course, make sure to like. You can dislike if you want, but you're not going to see it. And I will see you all in the next video. Make sure to be there and have a good one.